I chose the book entitled Don't Call Me Grandma, written by Vonda Michelle Nelson and illustrated by Elizabeth Zunan. In this book, a young girl is visiting her great-grandmother Nell, who goes about life in a different way. This little girl is scared of her great-grandmother and tries to understand why she is the way she is. She learns more about her great-grandmother Nell as they go throughout the day, and her great-grandmother reminisces on how things used to be. She even opens up about how her heart was broken for the first time by her friend who said they couldn't be friends anymore because she had brown skin. A whole page with pictures and artifacts is dedicated to the civil rights movement and what came about because of it. By the end of the book, this little girl has developed a greater understanding and love for her great-grandmother. I chose this book because the pictures and storyline are engaging. Children can relate to this little girl. They can put themselves in her place and think of their own experiences with grandparents and great-grandparents. Although this story is fictional, it provides great historical content. There is a whole page about the civil rights movement. Although the book doesn't go into depth on what happened, it leaves the door open for you to discuss what really happened during this time. This book uses a lot of form and function. Things that great-grandmother Nell says are not always what they mean. It would be a good source to help students better understand that sometimes words have double meanings. I would use this book with a second grade class towards the middle or end of the year. It could be used in connection with the Utah Core Standard No. 1. Students will recognize and describe how people within their community, state, and nation are both similar and different. Specifically, Objective 2, recognize and describe the contributions of different cultural groups in Utah and the nation. We would discuss in class the importance of different cultures and identities, specifically how Martin Luther King Jr. made a difference for the whole nation. This book would be most beneficial for ELL students who have a basic understanding of English and are able to think more abstractly. It is simple enough that I do not believe it would overwhelm those who are not as advanced, but it would help those who are ready to think more deeply about the form and function of words in the English language. The first concept I would like to address is form and function. Bachman modified earlier models of communicative competence by stating that it can be divided into two separate categories. One of these categories is elocutionary competence. Elocutionary competence pertains to the functional aspect of language or the sending and receiving of intended messages. In the book Principles of Language Learning and Teaching by H. Douglas Brown, Brown states, "Functions are essentially the purpose that we accomplish with language, while forms are the outward manifestation of language, words, grammars, rules, etc. Functions are the realization of those forms." John Austin, another theorist, went more into depth with this idea, which he called speech acts. He gave three main meanings or forces of speech acts, which dive further into Bachman's idea. Elucidatory meaning, the literal meaning which is conveyed by the form or words used in the sentence. Elocutionary force, the intended effect of the speaker or writer, or the function of the sentence used, what the one speaking really means. Or perlocutionary force, the actual effect or understanding the hearer internalizes from the sentence or phrase. Here is an example from the text. It says, "I pretend to be a movie star too, but she clicks her tongue. Scandalous, she says, so I stop." Great-grandmother Nell never explicitly told her great-granddaughter to stop, but that is the meaning or function that came across when she clicked her tongue and used the word scandalous. I would use this example, along with many others found in the book, to show that some words can be used to have multiple functions. You don't explicitly have to tell someone they need to stop. There are many different phrases one can use. In order for my students to apply this, I would have them take these examples and think of words or phrases that their parents use that have double meanings or serve a different function. For the EL students, they could do one in their native language and in one in English. I would have students share with the class what they came up with, and we would write these words or phrases down on the board. If we had more time, I would have them write them down on paper and draw a picture of the literal meaning and the intended meaning. Another concept that I found was on cultural identity, specifically focusing and using realia. Realia is defined as objects from real life or from the real world, as opposed to theoretical constructs or fabricated examples. Realia can be used to tell more effective stories and allow the student to visualize what actually happened. It can be anything from actual objects to news articles or pictures of an event. It allows the students to make a connection between the language and their culture. An example from the text would be the page that has pictures of events from the civil rights movement. It includes news articles and a theater ticket, pictures of protesters, and a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. This shows that someone's cultural identity can be represented in many different ways. Events that happen in the past help define who we are and why we do certain things. I would allow the students to look at these items on the page and let them decipher what is going on during this period of time. We would have a discussion about the civil rights movement and the things that people experienced. After the students have a better understanding of the civil rights movement and what the realia in the book means, I would then ask them what kind of objects they could bring in to describe their own culture and identity. We would discuss this as a class and make a list on the board of what items they could come up with and why it represents them. Then I would have them bring to class different realia to help us learn about their background and cultural identity. Overall, Don't Call Me Grandma is a good book and a great resource to have in the classroom to show students the importance of cultural identity and the forms and function of language.